Welcome to the Wholehearted Eating Podcast, where non-diet nutrition, weight-inclusive care, and integrative health collide. We're your hosts, Dana Montes and Christina Hoyt, licensed integrative clinical nutritionists and body image coaches.
And we believe you deserve to have a joyful relationship with food in your body, even if you have a chronic health condition or symptoms that just won't quit. On this show, together and with our guests, we're bringing the real talk, no BS vibe with tangible tools to help you pursue health and wellness without obsession or restriction.
Remember our disclaimer, this podcast is meant for general information purposes only and should not be taken as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Yeah, so today, guys, we're going to talk about the idea of like food as a reward. And I think I feel like it's not something that I don't think we've ever talked about it.
Not a whole episode on it, yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. But I feel like we have the idea and people understand the concept as food as a reward. But this kind of came into play because I talk about this a lot with clients sometimes. But then another piece too is that I saw this post on Pinterest about food as a reward. And then once you look at one thing on Pinterest, it's like the whole algorithm gets shifted. Now I have everything about seed cycling on my, and like cycle syncing all over my stuff because I was doing a deep dive into that for, if you haven't heard it, it's coming or it already played. I don't know the schedule like Dana does. but what's interesting is like I saw this on Pinterest and then I started seeing all this stuff around how to change food as a reward in like habits, but all of them were always like a little bit diety. And I was like, no, this is really good information and understanding how we might use food as a reward. And I think it really starts in childhood. And I see this even with my own kids. Like sometimes like, we all decide like, oh, it's Friday afternoon and it's sunny. It's nice. Let's go treat ourselves to a little ice cream at the shop. And then like, it's innocent enough, right? Because I don't prioritize food in like a treat as like good or bad, or you have to earn it or anything like that. But sometimes, it's like, I can't always go to the ice cream shop with all my kids and family. It's expensive, So sometimes it's like a special thing, right? To go and do those types of stuff. And sometimes like I think about when I was little, do you remember how you would get these reward systems when you were a kid with like stickers or like if you got straight A's, you got to go out for ice cream or you got to go to McDonald's or you got to have some special dinner or some special thing. Like, I think sometimes we've had this like kind of built into our society as food as a reward from a really young age. And then we go into adulthood and we have this kind of food reward type system in our relationship with food. And it feels really chaotic because it's spouted as kind of like a bad thing. But in our childhood, it was a really fun, special moment of connection with family and with having time and having something special that you get to do together. And so it was really interesting to me. And I thought it would be a really great topic for us to talk about on the podcast together and talk about why do we think of food as rewards as necessarily a bad thing? And why does that feel like something that we need to fix in adulthood?
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, the short end of the stick is like, of course, it's about weight gain because, of course, it's always about weight gain. And I think that
aesthetics.
Yeah, right. The kind of TLDR that we will get into throughout the episode is we kind of think of this in the same way as like stress eating and emotional eating as coping tools, right? It's like if this is the only way that you have to reward yourself, then we may want to diversify because that can feel when you feel very pigeonholed into this is the only tool that I have, that can feel very out of control, even if nothing out of control is happening. And out of control is also a very relative perception. But with things like stressing eating and emotional eating, that can feel very out of control if that is the only tool that you have accessible and available. So what we always talk about is that the tool itself is not the bad thing. It's more of a signal that there is something going on that needs to be addressed. And at the same time, we can work on diversifying the tools and understanding why that is our go-to tool in the first place. And so that's what we wanted to go into with food as a reward. And like Christina was saying, just like emotional eating is built into our framework as humans with birthdays and holidays and celebrations and funerals and all of these different things, food is an integral part of community and family and life and celebration and all these different things. And it's also used as a reward. Because if you think about it, like if you eat ice cream every single day, you're probably doing like, oh yeah, I'm getting, whatever at the grocery store. But like Christina was mentioning, if you're going to the fancy schmancy ice cream shop that just opened up, that's going to get really expensive if you go there every day. And so it's more of an every once in a while type thing. And then when we think of the other things that we tend to use as like a treat yourself moment, it's money, things related to money, retail therapy, other stuff like that. Sometimes it's vacations, sometimes it's alcohol, it's a very kind of, I need to earn this. And that is where things get very muddy, especially with food, because now we're going back to the whole good versus bad. I'm only allowed to have this if I've earned it kind of thing. This is also very tied into exercise as well. And I think another interesting component of this is, I don't know if this is still the case because I'm not on TikTok anymore because it's quite frankly too addicting for me. So I am not on there anymore. Just being honest. It is very addicting. Cool, but not for me. But so there was this whole trend going around of like, I deserve a little treat. And like after every minor life inconvenience, people are like, I deserve a little treat. I deserve a little treat, which like on the one hand is a dopamine hit. And sometimes, if you've got ADHD or whatever, you need stuff to get you through the day. The world is bleak sometimes. And then on the other hand, it's kind of like, this especially in like reader circles, it's like you don't need to go buy a book for every minor inconvenience that life throws you because you're going to rack up a lot of debt on your credit card, So
really funny TikTok memes though.
Yes,
I mean, I will say really funny, like GIFs are a part of this and like I love it. And I feel like in a way it's funny and it's comical, but there is like a deep rooted cultural belief that's under the undercurrent of it is that you get rewards for your behaviors. And we were talking about how that's such a millennial thing to live with.
It is what we grew up with.
That is so it's so much what we grew up with, in so many ways. I also was thinking too about how self-care is weaved into this. Like think about the things, if you Google self-care, all of them are things that are like expensive and things that you have to shell money out for, like getting your nails done, getting your hair done, getting a massage, having like whatever it is, all of the like acupuncture, all of these things that are great. I love doing all of the above.
Cool and expensive.
Cool and you got to pay to play. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I think in some ways, like this idea, this article that I found about food as a reward and coming up alternatives, I was really drawn to it because I thought, wow, this would be really helpful because there is this idea that food has to be earned. And if we grew up where food or these types of things like alcohol or buying something or getting something is always our go-to for reward, it's almost like a default in some ways. And our idea is the whole idea that food has to be earned is something that we're really trying to move away from, because what ends up happening is we often think like, I don't deserve to eat this until I've earned it. And I think that narrative is something really deep in our our diet culture, and also paired with this idea of rewards, And so when we're like, oh, I've had a really hard day, I'm going to have, a big old glass of wine, or I've had a really hard day, so I'm going to go eat a bunch of, Oreos or whatever it is, who knows. Or I'm going to treat myself, quote unquote, to these types of things, or I'm going to treat myself to this other thing and going to do that. I'm all for treats. I love treats. I love getting my nails done as like a special, like it's been a week. I want to go do something nice for myself. I'm going to carve out, an hour and a half and go get my nails done. But when it's the only thing that you have accessible, that's to me when I'm thinking about non-food as rewards or other things like that, it does feel like you have to earn these kind of health promoting behaviors by productivity. And I think that really reinforces this idea that we have to earn these self-care tools, that we have to earn food, that we have to earn the time. We have to do all this stuff, which is such a millennial thing to have grown up with in every way. I can't like reinforce that enough. But like this idea that you can't meditate until you've completed these other tasks, or you can't have a cupcake until you've hit the gym or done these other things or earned it in some way. This whole idea as food as a reward is inherently building this. It's like almost like the building blocks for building the belief system around, food being earned. And you don't need to earn food. Food is a necessary element for you to be eating. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying a little chocolate here and there, and having ice cream or having whatever. And I think the idea about earning it and having it be as your reward center is difficult. And it's also difficult to acknowledge that habit. And then how do you create balance there between, okay, I am using food as my only type of reward, or I use alcohol as my only type of reward, or I use retail therapy as my only type of reward for these things that I'm doing. How do I switch that without demonizing that behavior?
Yeah. Because I think
that's really hard to do.
Yeah. And like every conversation that we have, there is a lot of nuance to this, because we're not saying there's anything wrong with like, you just got a promotion. Cool. Let's go out to a restaurant that we've never been to before and get like a fun, dinner and fun dessert or something like that.
100%.
Awesome.
Yeah.
At the same time, it doesn't mean that you are only allowed or only deserve to do things like that when you have achieved something or when you deserve a little treat or something like that, right? And at the same time, it's probably not sustainable for your wallet to be doing that all the time, right? So it's a very kind of fine line here. And to use like an everyday example, if you've had a really, rough day or rough week or something like that, you'd be like, what sounds great right now? Like one of my favorite comfort foods, maybe it's like your favorite takeout spot, or maybe it's like box mac and cheese as like one of my favorite comfort foods or something. And I probably would lean into that. At the same time,
Thai food.
Yeah. At the same time, it doesn't mean that I'm only allowed or I only deserve to have that after a hard week or a hard day or something like that. And at the same time,
100%.
I probably don't want to be eating that every day because I would get bored of it. That's less on the expensive side of things, of like a fancy dinner, but it's like, I don't want to get bored of my favorite comfort food, because we're always trying to think of how can we diversify things. So another article that Christina found was more of like a non-diet approach of alternate behaviors and things that you can use to reward yourself without food. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool idea. And what's really interesting is she was naming all these things that this article was saying, like she mentioned before, of like, oh, you can meditate, you can like journal, you can get your nails done, you can do all these different things. And what was really interesting to me is my first reaction is those things that are being given examples of rewards, like specifically meditation and journaling. If you are someone who is not in the habit of doing those things, that actually seems like more of a task than a reward. So the rewards have to be very individual. So for example, for me, if I'm like, oh, I really need to unwind from the day, like I want to do something fun for myself, it might be, a very like low stakes, low cost thing is like, I've been really looking forward to reading this book or something like that. For someone who's not a reader, that seems like a task, so it's very individual. Like Christine would be like, what do you mean you're going to be unwinding by reading a book? I'd rather watch Gilmore Girls or paint the house or something. Meanwhile, me, I'd be like, paint the house. That's a task for another day that I'm probably going to like hire somebody for, maybe I'll hire Christina to do that. But she loves doing stuff like that as a way to unwind. So even if we are pursuing different ways of looking at, what's a different way that I can reward myself for having some achievement, or it's been a tough week and I just don't want to do the hard things anymore and I'd rather just, relax and do something that I don't normally do for myself. What are, financially affordable ways of doing that? Or if you got the money, you got the money. You know, that's a different thing too. But how do we prevent those things from being like, I have to earn this specifically when it comes to food?
Yeah, 100%. I think also too, like, let's not kid ourselves. Meditation does not hit the same way a really nice snickety snack is going to hit, you know? Like, I'm sorry, it's just not. Like, my friends and I are planning, we're calling it Dip Fest 2024.
What is that?
And they're coming over because Super Bowl didn't end up happening the way that we wanted it to happen because a bunch of our friends ended up getting. We were calling it Super Snack Sunday. We did have Super Snacks Sunday for those of you who read our newsletters. It happened, but our dear friend was not included. And so we've decided to call it Dip Fest 2024 because all we want is a bunch of dips and stuff. I'm sorry, but we've been going through a lot. They finally got out of quarantine. And so we are rewarding ourselves with Dip Fest 2024. And I'm sorry if we were to have it's not going to slap the same way. If we're like, let's have a meditation circle and we're all going to get together and journal our feelings. Wonderful self-care practice. I love doing that kind of thing, but it ain't going to hit the way Dip Fest hits, you know? And I think that's like an important thing to think about too, you know, and to like play into it. And I think sometimes like we have this idea about these like non-food, non-alcohol, non-retail therapy types of rewards and things like that, which I think are wonderful. I think it's wonderful to diversify your coping and rewards things and the things that feel good. But let's also not at the same time say that compare the two as if I'm going to get the same thing out of it. Sometimes the thing you want is to sit down and watch a cozy movie underneath a blanket and eat a pint of ice cream. Like sometimes that's what you want and that's okay. And other times it's more of like, to me, it's more of the autopilot where it's like, I'm falling into this autopilot where I'm having a hard day and this is the only thing that I have available to me. And it's the only thing that I can do to comfort myself, which also is okay to lean into that. But also remembering at the same time, maybe there is a way for me to start to diversify the types of coping and reward type things that I have to broaden that so I don't, especially if you're having a hard time with feeling like I'm always going to food. I feel addicted to these types of behaviors, or I'm having a really hard time with alcohol. I feel addicted to it. Like it's the only way that I can get through the evening or through a hard day. It's totally understandable that you would want to look at these other opportunities and ideas for ways to add into your reward, like things that feel good. And I think like the whole idea of reward feels weird. It's really about things that feel good for you and what's exciting and what hits that part of you that's like, man, things have been tough. How can I support myself right now? And I think thinking about it from that perspective is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to think about the reward versus this is just something that I do for myself that makes me feel better, you know, because one of the things that we're aiming for in rewards is to celebrate something, or like I've gotten through the week and so I'm looking to feel kind of like rejuvenated and grounded or relaxed or whatever it is. And one of the things that, you know, you mentioned was like, what are you calling it again? Dip Fest 2024?
Dip Fest.
So part of that is food, right? But part of that is like your very close group of friends and you're going to feel very kind of like rejuvenated and connected and everything like that. But it's weird to think about seeing your friends is a reward for getting through the week. You know, that's something that's like, oh, this makes you feel better, but it's not a reward. For some people, this is how we could reframe also movement or exercise or something, because most people would not think of, oh, I'm going to the gym as a reward. Like this is one of the things that the article mentioned, or like going for a walk in nature or taking your pet for a walk or, you know, something like that, or a hike, or that doesn't feel like something you need to earn. That may feel like more of a task to some people. And at the same time, there are people for whom like, I love getting out in nature and I love going for hikes and I love, you know, taking a minute and walking my dog. And that's not something that you need to earn, but it is something that will probably feel very restorative and make you feel better afterwards. So that's another way that we can reframe things as well, is there are certain things that can help you feel like you're getting the stress out of your body or you're getting more grounded. And, one thing that I've been talking about with my clients a lot recently is when we're talking about coping tools, depending on what you need in terms of like, I need to get this energy out, that probably needs to be a more active movement-based coping tool. If you've been feeling totally pulled in 100 different directions and you need to feel more grounded, then something like restorative yoga or meditation or journaling or something like that may feel better for you. So part of this is also being able to, really take a step back and get more in touch with yourself and see, what are the things that I like? And then based on my capacity, my resources, my time, my energy, my money, like all these different things, what are some of the things that I enjoy? What are situations where I like to reward myself? Do I only have one coping tool? And we're going to go into the next part of the episode, which Christina lovingly refers to as an invitation.
I love an invitation. I say this all the time, but I think the thing is I think it is an opportunity for you to kind of look into how has food been utilized as a reward in your own relationship with food. And what does that look like for you? When did this start to show up in your life? When did this start to happen? Can you look back and think about, how was food used as a reward in childhood and growing up? And that's not demonizing it. It's more of like an understanding of where did this come from and how did this start? And then how does it show up now? How is this showing up for me now? How do I utilize food as a reward or as a way to cope with my big feels, And I think also too, is it more of a reward to you or is it like a dopamine hit, and what is that for you and how does that look? I think this is really like we said, that invitation to reflect a little bit deeper into your relationship with it and what and how food has been used as a reward throughout your life and how it's currently being used. I think one of the things too is the idea is not to stop using food as a reward either, right? But really is to think about it less shamey. I think sometimes what will happen is we'll go and do it man, I feel shitty about the fact that I did this, or I always do this, or this is bad. And I think it's okay to use food as one of the tools in your toolbox to celebrate. And as a reward for having a hard time or whatever. Because, the truth is that food has been used, and we have said this so many times on the podcast in various different episodes, but food is inherently emotional. And we have been using food throughout every culture in the world has been using food as a way in coping with emotions, whether that's being a celebration, like a wedding or a birthday or a new promotion or whatever it is. And then also too, when there's a death or we're grieving or something else, there's so many different ways in which that we're using food. So I think one is taking it as an opportunity for saying this is normal. It is okay to use food in this way. We have been conditioned to use food in this way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That conditioning is not bad. It's cultural and it can be really wonderful. And what we're also saying too at the same time is that it can be helpful sometimes to diversify your tools instead of always going straight to autopilot. And this is what I do, right? One of the things with Dip Fest 2024, where that came from for me was one of the things that I was talking to my therapist about was about how I have a tendency to, when I get overwhelmed or I'm really stressed, is to want to cocoon and want to just kind of go in and not be around anyone. But I really love my friendships. And he was saying, maybe you could try to get together with your friends. I'm like, okay, so this is what I want to do.
It's a little broader cocoon.
And it was, it's a little broader cocoon, right? But it is something to kind of think about. And so I think that's what's interesting about it is that it's going to be different for each person, but it really is what is my tendency and where did that come from? And how can I maybe diversify that? And what might actually feel really good for me and be supportive if I feel like this is becoming too much or I'm only utilizing this one tool.
So if you all are resonating with this, or you would like to go deeper into these questions and kind of examining your relationship with food and other things as a reward, and maybe how that shows up in your relationship with food now, we're going to be sharing a kind of bonus resource over on Patreon that will be linked in the show notes. And, bonus episodes galore and all of the other community stuff that we do over in Patreon. It's not like just you're getting this only PDF, but if you're interested in that, or if you have follow-up questions on this episode, email us at hello@wholeheartedeating.com. Find us on Instagram at wholeheartedeatingpod. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can actually leave a question directly on the episode in Spotify now, if that's where you listen and you don't feel like clicking over to your email to send us an email with a follow-up question. But we're sure that this conversation will be weaved into our episodes over the next couple of weeks as well. So if you have follow-up questions, or the next time that we do a listener questions episode, we'll be sure to pop those in there too.
Also, this is what Patreon's all for, guys. Come on over and talk with us. This is what this is all about, so that we can have these kind of more nuanced conversations and get deeper into it. And you can ask us personal questions. I mean, who wouldn't want to have access to two nutritionists on the ready in a Patreon community with other people going through the same stuff?
Yep. Just saying. All right, we'll see you all next week.
Just saying.
Hey friends, it's Dana, and thanks so much for listening to the Wholehearted Eating Podcast today. Find us on social media at Wholehearted Eating Pod on Instagram, and at wholeheartedeating.com for more information about working with Dana and Christina for one-on-one nutrition counseling. If you love the show, we would love you forever if you'd share an episode with your family and friends, or tag us on social media, or leave a 5-star rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts to help more people find the show. Check out patreon.com/wholeheartedeating to help support the show and get access to ad-free episodes, bonus episodes with us and our guests, episode discussions, new resources we're creating for Patreon, and so much more. If you have questions for us, feedback on the show, potential topics or guests you'd love to have on, shoot us an email at hello@wholeheartedeating.com, and we'll see you next week.